Hello friends, this is Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me here on the Miss Ink Stamps YouTube channel for another card making video. For today's project, I'm going to be using products from the Magical Collection, like this troll from the Misery Loves Company stamp set, and my little witch here from the Magical Graduation stamp set. I've colored them in with Olo markers and used the coordinating dies to cut them out. I'm also going to be using the Punny Farm frame die set, the magical newspaper background stamp, and the lightning bolts stencil. I've done my die cutting off screen so we can get right into creating our background. I used Kraft cardstock with the large rectangle die from the Punny Farm frame die set, and I also used some vanilla cardstock with the scalloped frame that I've cut twice. I also used the alphabet dies from the stamp set to cut the word ew and an exclamation point, and I'm going to add that as part of my sentiment for the front of the card. I'm going to start with the magical newspaper background stamp, and I'm just going to put that right onto my glass mat, and I'm grabbing Sand Dune VersaFine Clair ink and inking up this newspaper print design, and I'm going to apply my paper right onto this stamp. So I'm going to gently lay it on starting from the left side and then just use my hands to apply pressure to the back side of the paper to stamp that background onto this A2 piece of Kraft cardstock. I do get a little inky along the way, but I find that to be just a really easy way to add a background stamp to a piece of paper. I'm going to go ahead and clean off this background stamp and get it put away so I can move on to the next step of my card, which is going to be a little bit of ink blending and splattering. I'm going to grab Tea Dye Distress ink from Ranger and Tim Holtz and a blending brush, and I'm just going to go around the edge of all four sides of this A2 piece of paper. I'm going to just create a vignette kind of look, just darken up the edges, give it more of a rustic feel, and then I'm going to squish that ink onto my glass board, spray it with water, and use a paintbrush to add splatter all over the background. It's going to give it a nice tone-on-tone look with the print and the edge of the cardstock, but I want to darken up that splatter a little bit more, so I'm going to grab a re-inker of a dark brown ink. This is from Ranger ink as well, Weeping Willow Stellar ink. Add a little water, and I just use the same paintbrush to then splatter that ink on the background as well. Once I'm happy with the amount of splatter, I'll pick that up, and then we're going to move on to adding some white. I love adding white splatter to my backgrounds as well. I've cleaned off my paintbrush, and I'm going to then pick up some of that white ink, add water, and then splatter that onto my background, just like I did with the other two brown inks. Once I'm happy with that, I'll go ahead and clean that up as well so I don't swipe my hand through it, and then I'm going to use a towel to also kind of pat up the excess ink and water that is on this background before I move on to stenciling. For my stenciling, I'm using the Lightning Bolt stencil, and I'm going to grab Solar Spray, which is kind of a shimmery spray in the color Golden Hour. So I'm going to apply this kind of light shimmer of the lightning bolts by spraying through the stencil. So I'm getting it lined up as close to center as I can. I just wanted it to look even on top, bottom, left, and right. And I'm spraying on this solar spray, making sure that there is good saturation and that we'll be able to see the lightning bolts on this background. I carefully peeled it up, and I'm going to set that aside just so I can clean up my desk and put my stencil away. Once the lightning bolts have dried a bit, you can see in the light just how subtle that shine is, and it just gives a really pretty effect to this background. It's very subtle, but you can really see that shine. While I allow the background to dry a little more, I am gluing my two layers of the scalloped frame from the vanilla cardstock together. Just gonna line them up so it creates a bit of a thicker frame on the card, just giving some dimension while, not having to bulk up with too much foam adhesive. Once those two frames are glued together, I'll go ahead and add adhesive to the back of the frame, and I'll attach that to the center of my background that I've created. The lightning bolts are pretty much dry by now, so I don't have to worry about smearing them or, any type of risk with wet things on my background. I'm going to go ahead and place that right onto the center, and then I will move on to making my sentiment. So I've die cut the word ew. I decided that I liked how my frame had 2 layers, so I'm going to go ahead and cut out some additional letters for my sentiment. I already had an extra W, so I'm going to cut out just the exclamation point, another E, and one more W to finish off my sentiment. So I'm going to go ahead and, just like my frame, layer the letters together. So I'm using some tweezers to hold one of the letters. I add glue to the back, and then I'll go ahead and place that onto the second letter. So I will repeat that process with the rest of the letters, including the exclamation point, even that tiny little dot at the bottom of the point. And I'm going to put my 2 characters onto the card so I have an idea of where my sentiment will fit. So I'm going to have my troll on the bottom right and my witch on the bottom left. And so my sentiment will go at the top, a little bit more on the left since the troll is taller than my student witch here. And once I have it in place about where I want it, I do kind of scoot it over a little. I think it looks cuter just a little off-centered rather than all the way to the left. So I will then grab those tweezers again, add adhesive to the back side of each of my letters as a part of this sentiment, and get those glued down in place. After I have the die cut part of my sentiment on the card, I'm going to grab the stamp that I want from the Misery Loves Company stamp set and get that stamped onto the background. Now it's going to be freehand stamping, which I know is a little scary, especially with how far I've come on this card, but I'm going to grab VersaFine in Onyx Black, a nice dark crisp black ink. I thought about using brown, but I didn't want it to get lost in the background, so this black ink will make sure it really pops off the card. And I stamped "No Boys Allowed" right under the word ew, and that will finish off the sentiment. So I'm going to grab my foam adhesive and I'm going to start adding it to the back of my 2 characters. I'm going to make sure not to go too far down at the bottom, like at the very bottom of their feet, because that will overlap a bit with the frame. So once I get enough foam adhesive on my witch, I'll go ahead and place her at the bottom left. I'm going to use my troll on the right to just make sure that I have plenty of room and that it looks equally spaced once I get them both down. After the foam adhesive is on the witch, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the back of my troll, and I'll repeat the process, attaching my troll image to the front of this card panel. After that, that will finish off adding those images. So I'm going to grab my white gel pen and add some highlights, just adding little dots to the cheeks, highlights to my witch's hair and outfit, as well as on my troll. I added a lot of dots where I added stippling on the troll's skin just to give it that texture. I have a top folding A2 card base that I'm going to attach this card front to. So I'll go ahead and get adhesive onto the back of this card front, and I'm going to glue this onto the A2 card base. This background is A2 in size, so it fits perfectly on the front of the card. With that, that will finish off this Ew, No Boys Allowed Magical Collection card. I hope you had fun with me today creating this background and adding these images and our own kind of DIY sentiment. Let me know what you think of those lightning bolts in the background, if you like that subtle shine, or if you would prefer maybe using a paste where it's much more vibrant. Thank you again for tuning in to the Miss Ink Stamps YouTube channel. You can find the supplies I use linked down below in the description box. Stay tuned for even more inspiration here on the YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Bye!